Hey, everybody, and welcome back into the Katella Chronicles Podcast with your host, Dominick Lorenz. And I have, once again, our very special Anaheim Ducks guest, Zach Gray from Ducks Gameday Breakdown with me. Zach, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Hey, I can't complain. We're getting through another work week. We both just got off of work, so we can relax. There's no Ducks
Yeah.
hockey, but we're coming off a big victory against Columbus the night before, which kind of took a little time to get underway due to the power outage at Nationwide Arena
Mhm.
out in Columbus. So the happiness was a little bit delayed, but it was well worth it at the end of the day. I
Mhm.
think you'd agree with that one.
Oh, absolutely. I thought the game was going to get rescheduled.
Oh,
I thought it was going to get canceled. There was a big rumor that they were going to reschedule it, and then the Ducks were going to have a couple of days off. So good thing they got to play. So
no, especially, first game of a 4-game East Coast swing that features teams like Boston, Philadelphia, Columbus, and it all ends in Pittsburgh. You don't want any
mhm.
unnecessary extra days off, especially early on in the season when you're trying to get into the proper flow. And speaking of proper flow, it's a
Mhm.
great segue. And some of you that follow Katella Chronicles and Ducks Game Day Breakdown as well, if you were along for the ride last podcast episode, my co-host David Goodkind was there today. He's not. He's having some personal health stuff going on. So, prayers up, get healthy, David. If you're watching along, we look forward to having you back in our podcasting circle when when all is well. But it gives a perfect opportunity for Zach to be the co-host today. And funny enough, I'm his co-host. He's my co-host because it's a perfect opportunity to announce right now that Katella Chronicles and Ducks Game Day Breakdown are merging together and going to be collaborating for all of your Anaheim Ducks needs when it comes to podcasting. Zach's still going to do his awesome stuff on Instagram and TikTok, which, by the way, the Game Day Breakdowns, I know last year was your first year back into it. And, we all
Yeah.
kind of get into the flow after 1 year. But I'm not going to lie, the first couple of games, and especially the Phoenix Coyotes Game Day Breakdown and the Boston Bruins one,
Mhm.
chef's kiss, man.
No, I appreciate it, man. Like I put a lot of thought into it, and it's never scripted. And that's the
No,
thing. Like I know for most people, they're like, you have to script this, right? I'm like, no,
no.
it's never scripted. It just comes from here and here. Like that's it.
And
So, but I appreciate that.
I love it. And that's the authentic Ducks fan reaction and just overall good nature that not only I love personally, but we love here at Katella Chronicles. So to be one and the same when it comes to our podcast, the goal at the end of the day, fans, is to have a weekly podcast. And the goal right now, pending schedules and maybe some crazy things that happen
Mhm.
on a regular, Wednesdays around 5 o'clock is the goal. And even though we're coming here on YouTube right now, the overall goal is to be live on Instagram. We want
Mhm.
your guys to be a part of it 24/7 whenever we're on air. We want you guys, all your questions, all your comments, and just integrate with us as much as possible. Because I know the fans love Ducks Game Day Breakdown. And I know Katella Chronicles fans, they love us when it's Angel season. And Ducks season last year was kind of hit and miss. It was a very sad, tough year. So the feeling and the energy maybe what quite wasn't there as much as we wanted it to be. But so far, it's a new
Mhm.
season. There's a lot of progress being made in this organization. And I think we both agree that this is the perfect time to do this.
Oh, absolutely. And just to let everybody know, last year jumping back into it, and one of my biggest supporters, and I love her with all my life, is my wife. She's the one that was like, you love this stuff, you love dissecting and looking into plays and what's going on in and out of this team because you know I mean, first thing I do when I get up is that's what I'm researching. Like that's just my brain, my heart. It's just, and that's why like this means a lot to me. And that's why I think Dominick, you'd be a great addition to the team and everything. And I think it'd be great.
And it's a double bonus because even though for Katella Chronicles, Zach is our resident Dodgers fan, but
Hmm.
baseball is still in the blood here. Katella Chronicles is not changing. We're still covering Angels and Ducks. Ducks Game Day Breakdown is not changing at all. We're mashing the best of both worlds and putting it
Hmm.
live on Instagram. Zach's still going to do his wonderful TikTok stuff. We're going to still do wonderful social media stuff. It's going to be great. This is only going to benefit not only just us being fans and supporters,
Hmm.
but it's going to hopefully support you guys in being a fan as well. And we want your questions. We want your comments. We want everything you got. Bring it along for the ride. And I know David, again, couldn't be here on this podcast today. He's super excited about this as well. He'll be popping in every so often as well. So to have us three, and I know there'll probably be other people popping on in throughout as well. Second year is always the charm, baby. And we're going for it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to have you along the ride. So there'll be some baseball talk every once in a while. Off season's coming up.
Yeah.
It's Diamondbacks and Rangers. Who would have thought? Who would have thought in that sense at the end of the day?
I don't know. But to add to what you were saying about, the followers asking questions, like every podcast that we do the last 10, 20 minutes, depending on how we wrap up, we'll answer some follower questions when they're popping up, because they're going to be popping up constantly throughout the show. But yeah, getting back to baseball, I mean, I still think Texas is going to win in 6. Okay. I think they're a wagon. Diamondbacks, I got to give them credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
I mean, they remind me a lot of, and I know Angel fans are going to like this, they remind me a lot of the 2002 Angels.
Yeah, 100%.
In a way. Do I think they're going to get it done? We'll just have to wait and see.
Who knows? I think at the end of the day, whoever's in there, I want entertaining baseball. And baseball was always my first love and passion. And I love all sports, but as long as we get good competitive baseball going into November, which is what this is about. And you saw it last year. It was Astros, Phillies were the rising up and coming. And here are the Diamondbacks. Here's Arizona out of nowhere, surprising the baseball world. So it'll be nice to see Rangers, Diamondbacks, a battle of Southwest. East Coast is not going to give one care in the world about this World Series, which is a rarity in times like these now, with East Coast and West Coast bias, whatever side of the coin you live on. But
sure.
To Zach's point, fans, bring your questions. And even though this is not a very first official fan question or fan mailbag or whatever we're going to term it is at the end of the day, it's a perfect segue to the first topic of the day with the Ducks. They're beginning a big 4-game road trip. They get off with a beautiful win in overtime against the Columbus Blue Jackets. But the question on everybody's mind is, where's Leo Carlsson? He doesn't play, and he doesn't play the previous game against Boston. So everybody's sitting there saying, this guy's your number 2 overall pick. He's young. He's a stud. He looked great in his NHL debut. He did have an injury coming out of camp, which made him miss the first game against, Las Vegas. So we got a lot of questions. You got a lot of questions and a lot of kind of sighs and shocks. What's going on with Leo Carlsson?
I think the biggest question is, was that initial reaction right before the season started was, always going to play in the NHL the whole year. Not every game, didn't really say specifics. But the biggest thing for me was that news where he got healthy scratched against Boston. Then he got healthy scratched yesterday against the Blue Jackets. And then finally that news came out about him, and his agent sat down with Pat Verbeek. And I read something interesting today, and I heard about it on Sportsnet from Elliot Friedman. The Tampa Bay Lightning did the same thing with Steven Stamkos, as a matter of fact. So what they did was that they limited his playing time until about the last half of the second half of the season, depending on how the Ducks do. And I see this team, finishing a little bit, maybe a few games over 500, maybe not a wild card team. I mean, we would all love to see that.
Oh, absolutely.
But but I honestly, from this standpoint, I think that they're just following their process, and what they're looking to do is stick to that process, which is something we have not had in Anaheim forever.
Yeah.
So
I think there hasn't been a day that goes by that you're sitting there and you're saying, it's really hard to digest it at first glance, because you're sitting there saying, this is a number 2 pick. Everybody's toting this guy. There's a lot of hype. He had a great first career game, and he's young. He should be ready to go. I could, on initial impact, I could see this being the case where he was drafted while he was coming off an injury. and they want to ease him back into the fold and kind of maybe put him on a lower line, and then every once in a while put him on the top line and adjust him and kind of see where he's at. But once now that we have the second layer of the onion and the real story with his agent and Verbeek and everybody's on the same page with this kid. It's ease him in the first couple of months to first half of the year, and then guns ablaze in the second half. And if the Ducks are in the middle of a run or on a streak and he can contribute to that, I think it's a win-win no matter what. But if your litmus test is Steven Stamkos, are we gonna say, oh, don't do it? It's like, look at Stamkos' career.
Yeah, I'm not going to debate that.
No.
And you know, it's hard to follow the process because you see how well he has and developed that chemistry with Terry so fast. You know, and I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you know,
go for it.
The one I'm worried about is, I mean, watching Terry and Leo get so far ahead, and then you just see, which we'll get to later on, is Trevor Zegras is just not performing the way that he was. And I think when it comes down to it is that when I see Leo perform as well as he does, I'm like, how can you let this guy sit out of the lineup? That's my biggest caveat, is that I'm like, dude, and I put the post out right before the podcast, is that, you know, let Leo Carlsson play. Like, let him play. I know Boston's a really tough team. I know tomorrow's game is going to be a grind. But I want to see what this kid's got against a bigger, tougher team, especially a team that was damn near contending, and they lost to a team that they never thought that they would have lost to in the first round. So,
you know, and the Ducks are in a situation where they just came off of playing Boston 2 games ago, and they were highly competitive in that game, had a 1-0 lead before, unfortunately, the wheels fall off and they end up going down at Honda Center. But you're sitting there in a scenario, I could see the Ducks before all this news. Okay, maybe rest Leo Carlsson, either the front end or the back end of a back-to-back. Okay, young kid, don't want to wear him out. I get it. Maybe there's 4 games in a week or something wild and you want to give him 2 days off. Okay, I get it. But when you have that tug and pull between your head and your heart, and you're trying to look at the big picture, and we talked about this last time, big picture thinking, and there is a plan in place, better than I can say about the Angels, not to get too off the baseball, but you know, I am sporting the combo Angel Ducks hat today for Katella.
Totally fine.
There is a direction with this team, and Greg Cronin has done a phenomenal job executing that plan. Everything's transparent right now. There is no lies. There is no, you know, pulling the wool over our eyes. This is what the Ducks are, and it's fine. It's just when you have something that's so nice and, you know, beautiful, you want to let that flourish. And that would have been like me last year, the year before, when Zegras was going off, when he's doing his lacrosse style goal after that game in Buffalo a couple years ago, saying, okay, Zegras, great goal. Glad you made SportsCenter top 10 play of the night. Now go sit for the next week. And everybody's like, you're taking our box office away from us. So
and here's my question to you, Dom.
Yeah.
Is that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed, that fans, that they notate when it comes to Trevor Zegras. It's not about what he does in the small areas of the ice. It's not about what he does when he gets out on the rush. It's about the Michigan goals and about how great he is at his stick handling and his hands, which the kid has incredible hands.
There's no debate. Absolutely.
Right. But the thing that everybody knows, but he does this with the puck. He does that with the puck. I'm like, yeah, but what does he do in the defensive end? What does he do when he gets on the rush and he has a guy who's a little bit bigger than him?
Yeah.
He gets knocked off the puck too easily. And that's not me saying like I'm hating on Trevor Zegras. No. Like I want him to get better. But I think this season, just by him missing camp, which is kind of segueing into our next topic,
it's perfect.
Him missing camp. Yeah, it just,
because that's like, where my head was going, was how much of him and you as a coach and things that you've done in your hockey career, how much do you think missing training camp derailed this start of the season? Because as of right now, he has 1 assist for 1 point, and that's it.
It's huge.
It's barren.
It's huge because you miss all that time, especially with like, say for instance, we had Dallas Eakins, which barf. And, say we still were in that situation. And even
Correct.
him missing that is still big.
It's still
And the
detrimental.
thing, correct. And you're missing 2 weeks and you come back, everybody's tapping their sticks. Great, man. But when I'm watching you play, you look very similar. Like, there's no question about it. You're quick with the puck. You make very quick reactionary moves. No question about it. But when it comes to the defensive play in the small areas of the ice, you're lacking. And this is what I'm talking about. It's, Buffalo Sabre fans, I remember there was a rumor going around before we made the signing that he was going to be going to Buffalo. And people are like, no, we don't want him. And there was a rumor that we were going to get Rasmus Dahlin.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's not happening. But they were talking about how he was going to go to Buffalo, and Buffalo fans were like, no, you can keep him.
Yeah.
Because we know that he's a fraud. So, no, go ahead.
No, it's a weird, to your point, it's a very weird, precarious situation, because to relate it to baseball terms, it's almost like Zegras is that big home run hitter, but he strikes out 200 times a season. He doesn't do the small move the runner over from first to second with a sacrifice button. It's just power, flash. And I think it's one of those situations for Zegras where he might need to look in the mirror a little bit. He just got his little bit of money. He got a little bag, a 3-year contract. You might have to start internalizing and look at yourself and say, okay, this is my game offensively. No one's debating it. Maybe a couple small, minute details you want to clean up because of the training camp situation. But I think if Zegras can find a way to figure out his defensive side of his game and improve upon it, get a little bulkier, just do everything the right way, you can start to paint the picture of him being a more complete player.
And that's why they chose Leo Carlsson, because he's a complete player. He plays both ends of the ice. And that's something that, man, dude, like, I talked about it so much. It was like a new fan drinking game with Drysdale and Zegras. Like, it was just constant news. And I'm like, guys, he doesn't play both ends of the ice. And that's why I mentioned to you and brought up, I'm like, when people talk about Zegras, they're like, yeah, but he picked up the puck and did that. I'm like, guys, like, it's great. Don't get me wrong. When I see him in the shootout, I'm like, yeah, but he has no pressure, so he can take his time.
Yeah, it's almost like, when it comes to fans, and I don't want to say fair weather fans, even diehard fans can say the same thing. So it's fans in general, the media, they always attract to, a new shiny object, something that just sparks the attention fast. It's that quick trigger mentality. And I think that's
casual is how I would put it.
Casual. It's a very casual mentality. And again, it's understandable. Zegras has given us some very good moments in some very dark times, like last year, franchise worst season. But now, with younger talent coming about, he's another year older. He's got to start like Troy Terry, Mason McTavish. You've been on this team. You should be starting to evolve a little bit and become the leader and change up your game. And it's almost like the league knows what he's doing and they've adjusted to him. Now he has to readjust and pivot to throw everybody else off so he can now take the upper hand in his game.
And all I want to see the kid do is mature and grow up a little bit, because I've had fans tell me, like at our recent face-off fest that we just had, fans told me, they're like, oh yeah, he got up as soon as the minute was done and he's looking down at his phone, ignoring fans. And I'm just like, dude, you know what? As much as I love the guy and he's my favorite Mighty Duck of all time, that's how Paul Kariya was. He was the same way. And Corey Perry,
a little distant.
Correct. And Corey Perry, same way. Like, Corey Perry was that way when he won the Hart Trophy, won the Rocket Richard. But, you kind of have to, like, look at like you said, look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, these fans pay my salary. And I need to respect them and take the time for them. Like, not everybody's going to be a Team with Solani and wait for everybody to get an autograph and then he can call it a day. But Zegras, I feel like, he might need to feel the pressure a little bit. He might need to get knocked around a little bit, and us doubting him and then prove us wrong. Like, because
Yeah.
that's all I want from him at the end of the day. So
You got to play a little bully ball with the fans. The fans got to kind of chip you down a little bit, knock you down. You got, quote unquote, you got to hit a little rock bottom a little bit, find yourself in a bad situation and realize, hey, time to wake up. I got to improve myself for the team's sake, not for your individual accolades and different things. You got to do you. And like you said, we're not asking him to be Teemu Selanne with the fans. Totally get it. He's not going to right away be the next Ryan Getzlaf and be the pinnacle of this organization. No, we're just asking you to put your head down, do your job, and adjust with the changes. It's not going to be the same style of hockey he played last year. Is not going to be how the rest of the career is going, or how just the NHL. The NHL is not going to wait for him. He has to keep up with the speed of the NHL.
Correct. And that's why I think Verbeek, to finish off, with the Zegras topic, is I think Verbeek was extremely smart. He's like, you know what? I've been there. I've come into training camp. I've been a free agent. I know what that feels like. It's not a good feeling, but I think that Verbeek is wise in, okay, I'm going to see what you can do for 3 years. I'm going to give you that chance. Drysdale, he's injured again. Yeah. And he paid him practically nothing. And he's like, prove to me. And I love that about him. The only part that I don't like is the not knowing. It's the not. He's like a Lou Lamoriello for the New York Islanders. He doesn't speak, and you're just like, okay, but where did this come from? But he's making all of the right decisions, and I think with Zegras, with Drysdale, if somehow down the line and say when they're RFAs and they come up and they haven't proven themselves, hey man, I took a gamble on you. You didn't produce. That's it.
You have 3 years to get this ship steered in the right direction. Drysdale missing last year. Now Zegras starting off slow. Drysdale now back on the IR, as you mentioned again. That was probably the biggest health-related news to the Ducks this week, going to the IR. They did get Vakanainen back in the lineup defensively, which was a nice little piece for speed purposes. But I think overall, when it comes to those two, and to finish this final thought, is you said it perfectly. Verbeek took a chance. And I think you would have had, maybe not fans clamoring at the gates, but you would have had some fans that were very displeased if Zegras and Drysdale were not on this team right now. And the deal didn't get done and they were free agents and something wacky happened based on what has gone on with this organization, let's say during the Dallas Eakins era. Okay. So to get them back, Verbeek did what he was probably supposed to do, as you mentioned. But now he did his 50%. Now you got to come up and do your part of the bargain. So hopefully it's just a slow and steady foot in the mud kind of start, first 6-7 games to the season. And there is an ascension at some point, because you're going to need a spark to get something going. No doubt about it.
Right. And one last thing, just to finish this off, is that
we promise it's one last
thing.
thing.
No. It's just, we could talk about this all day.
Oh, it's great.
To the fans who say to me, and I get DMs all the time, and I appreciate them. I love you guys. It's great. But just because you buy the merchandise, it doesn't guarantee them a spot on this team.
Yep.
It just doesn't work like that. Just because you buy their jersey, just because you pay an excessive amount for their jersey and the lettering and their T-shirt, it does not guarantee them a spot. And I heard that so many times about John Gibson, about Jakob Silfverberg, Adam Henrique, about Trevor Zegras. They can't leave because they're my favorite player. Guys, it's an NHL business. It's a business at the end of the day. They're trying to get us to the thing, which is the Stanley Cup, the playoffs. They want us to be competitive. But when you guys say crap like that, it just, it grinds my gears, no question about it, because I'm just like, guys, like, you want to be good, but then it's like you're not willing to make sacrifices. And I'm not saying sacrifice Zegras. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, like, some players they work out and they blossom. We just have to wait and see with Zegras. That's what it boils down to.
To the Angel fans that are out there, that's exactly what we're going to deal with this offseason with Shohei Ohtani. Do you pay him and pinch the franchise for the next God knows how many years? Or does he do the business and leave, and the Angels are left empty-handed trying to figure out what's next? We all know he's everybody's favorite player, and he's the biggest marketing scheme in baseball, but that doesn't necessarily mean he gets to stay in Orange County forever. So,
Correct.
we could, again, Angels and Ducks, very relatable on many different fronts here early on.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
I don't want to keep feeling like we're going on the negative Nancy train here.
No, we're being honest.
But it's a perfect segment to the next one, because the topic after this one is going to have a little pro and a little con. This one's going to feel a little connish.
Okay.
How many penalties are we going to take before it's enough? Because 7 last night against Columbus. Luckily, they only went 1 for 7. With the amount of penalties that the Ducks are taking, I will say the PK unit is doing it justice, because if you're giving up 7 and the Ducks were having PK units like they were the last couple of years, teams would be getting 4 or 5 goals a night just on the power play.
I mean, I don't, and I'm gonna sound like an exclusive negative, not a negative Nelly, but just like an exclusive fan. I don't necessarily feel like all those 35 calls were legitimate calls, because I'm watching some of them and I'm like Frankie Vetrano against Boston, where I don't know who it was, but he had a stick right here and he let go within a second and the ref still called it. Last night, I mean, some of those calls, I'm just like, those aren't calls.
That was like the Arizona game was pretty bad too.
Oh man,
that
dude,
one was that one's probably so far the epitome of bad call game this year so far, 100%.
So I don't know if it's necessarily undisciplined play, or it's just bad officiating, which has been going on for a long time. And I know if you're a ref and you're reffing Skaha, if you're reffing whatever it is, beer league, this isn't a slight against you, because I don't know you. Dom doesn't know you. It's just stuff that we're seeing where refs are making calls instantly instead of just like, well, is it the way that it looks? Like the call on Sam Carrick against the Vegas Golden Knights. The guy lost his footing, lost an edge, and
he's
it's
already
kind of
going
the same
down.
thing. Right.
So
like Radko Gudas.
It's almost like you're supposed to, almost like the NFL. The refs want you to levitate. They want you to think you have full control of your body. And as you're on, look at Carrick. He's going in, hip checking while a guy is going down. Okay, what do you want him to do? Take his entire force and gravity going towards that way and just go, whoop. He's not a wizard here.
Right. Like it's the same thing with the Radko Gudas against Arizona, which you brought up. And it was shoulder on shoulder, and they were ready to give him a 5.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
they contemplated that for a good couple of minutes. It's like, what? It's hockey. I've seen people
blew my mind, man. Like and that's why I say like the 30, I think it's 35 and counting. They lead the league right now. I don't necessarily put it all on them, because the officiating has been so bad. And that's why I say, and if you guys don't listen to the Steve Dangle podcast, I recommend it for any diehard hockey fan, casual, if you want to learn more about the game and what's going on around the league. I would say, do your fucking job. Like, please, stop it with this nonsense of just we're just going to call any little thing. It's not about the hockey gods. It's not about the Ducks and nobody likes us and we don't care. It's not about that. It's about just do your job, man. So that's my rant.
I 100% feel you, and I agree with you. And I messaged you after the Arizona game, and I said, bravo to you, because 9 out of 10 people would say, oh, you're complaining, oh, this. But when you slow the tape down and you compare some of these calls, it is a little suspect. Now, for argument's sake, 35 penalties for the Ducks so far is a large number, regardless if the calls are good, soft, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes, is it a product of undisciplined play with that amount of penalties, or is it sometimes putting yourself approaching a bad situation which could cause you to be undisciplined? Is it that extra layer of the onion that could create a bigger problem?
I think it's the extra layer. I really think it's the extra layer. I mean, even in Columbus yesterday, just watching some of the calls that were made, I'm like, and this is something that's a really big positive. Okay, so we talked about the negative. Here's the positive.
Lay it
The
on
big,
me.
the big giant positive is that this team is conditioned. So when you look at them and you watch them on the PK, and I know people are on Silverberg's ass right now, and I don't understand why. He's on the third line. Like I've been on him, but my wife, somebody who has not been the biggest fan of his, is like, I love him on the third line. I love him on the PK. He gets about 13, 14 minutes a night. He's not getting the 22 that he was under Dallas Eakins. Yeah, I mean, he's doing everything he can, and people are like, trade Silverberg, and I'm like, what is that going to do, man? He's got a year left.
You're not going to get a whole team of Troy Terrys and Leo Carlssons right off the bat, folks. Like everybody has their role, and we talked about it a few minutes ago about Zegras. Find your role, get back to it. Silverberg is doing that. That's great. 14 minutes a night, it's fair in the PK unit, but continue.
We're not expecting 40, 50 points from Silverberg like we used to.
No.
We're not expecting that. It's the same thing like when we picked up Ross Johnson from the Islanders. We're expecting him to defend and protect his guys. That's what we're expecting. We're not expecting these guys to go above and beyond, especially in their back half of their career. You know, not everybody can be a Leo Carlsson, like you said, or Troy Terry. And Troy Terry, it's taken him a long time to get here, you know, but he's here. So
there's a part of it that's patience. Again, everybody says in any sport, turnovers lead to mistakes. I mean, you turn over the puck in your own zone, the neutral zone, opponent zone, it doesn't matter. That's a level of setting yourself up for a bad situation. You have to backpedal now and get into things. Now, the Ducks haven't been horrible in turnover the puck this year, but that's just a prime example for the fans at home. That's peeling the onion back one layer. Do something else. Have a poor forecheck one night. That could lead in some different problems. Goalie not being able to retain rebounds and just leaving free second chance opportunities right in front of the doorstep. That can cause unsolicited issues. So there's things that add up at a certain point that the Ducks will have to look at, and all teams in the NHL have to look at that, for that manner. But in the terms of penalties right now, regardless of the softness of these calls, I think conditioning wise, the Ducks are good. I think as they go along this year and wherever this season takes us, I think just limiting the number of bad situations they put themselves in will, of course, help limit any penalties, regardless if they're soft or if they're a quality call. I think that's
1,000%.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And not trying to patronize the fans to think, oh, good versus bad or anything. No, it's just how we feel about it, and literally what's on the tape. Go for it.
One thing I just wanted to add, and then we can move on. I think the biggest thing, instead of looking at the quantity, look at the quality of calls. And you be your own judge and executioner when it comes to, is that a quality call?
Yeah.
Because we all know, and instead of making an excuse like, the gods are against us, like, it's not about that. It's about sometimes refs just make a call just because to make a call.
Judgment
like
calls.
That's just, that's exactly how it goes.
Yeah. And I will admit, when you're watching the Ducks on Bally Sports West, our broadcasters, John Allers, does a phenomenal job of breaking down these calls sometimes. And Brian Hayward does the same thing. Here's the call. And sometimes I've seen it. They're not afraid to be like, what the heck is this? So look to the broadcasters, because the Ducks, this broadcast team has been here for a very long time. They are legit. Look to them, look for your own eyes, and then contemplate, and then wait for the results and see how the trend is the whole game, and then circle back. It's almost like you're in school all over again. Do your pretest, do your study guide, do the test, and then research what you did right and what you did wrong. So that's what we're asking for you, Ducks fans. Is that too much to ask?
No.
Do your homework.
No.
Do your homework.
No,
We're doing
just do
our
your
homework. You're doing. So basically, this podcast essentially is like the study guide portion. Okay. So I like it.
Yeah.
So let's now sprinkle in a little good with a little question. When we got into this last episode, and it's kind of, I don't want to say rearing its ugly head, but we have another example of this at our fingertips. Goalie situation. Gibson, Dostal. Dostal looked great last night against Columbus, single-handedly kept us in this game in certain opportunities. Gibson has either been really good or really, really soft, like Sharman. And I know in one of your breakdowns, you pretty much said it. You're getting to that tipping point of give the keys to the kingdom to the young one. Let the young buck take over. Are you still feeling that right now? And for you personally, what, besides not being soft anymore, what does Gibson need to do to perform better or just get back in your good graces?
I mean, I don't know if it's so much about getting back into my good graces, because I know that he facing 50, 60 shots last year a night. I mean, he's been to hell and back. And I think when it boils down to it, I think if you are the Edmonton Oilers right now, you make that trade. I don't care if we get Skinner. I don't care if we take on Jack Campbell. Like, you make that trade. I know not everybody's a big fan of Jack Campbell, but at the same time, if you're like, this is your role, this is how much we're paying you, this is what you're going to do. Because John Gibson, in the 3 games that he started, yes, he's made incredible saves, but his T-pushes and the way that he reacts to the puck coming at him, it just seems like he's a bit off. And that's where I'm not trying to hate on him. I'm just simply saying, like, there's something off. And I've talked to many Ducks fans about it. They've explained to me, they're like, you're not wrong. Like, there's something off with him. And people want to say, like, oh, but he was sick recently. I'm like, no. Like, stop with the excuses. And then when I look at Lucas Dostal to transition into that, he looks like a young Jonathan Quick. And I know some Ducks fans are going to say to me, oh, you can't, like, shut up. Like,
they literally
stop.
just shut off the podcast. You said the bad word. You said Quick, anything related with the Kings. It's like, come on.
But the difference is that guy's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And Lucas Dostal, when I look at him, I'm like, dude, you might be the next J.S. Shiger. You might be. And when watching him last night in any start, he should be 3-0 right now against Arizona. He played solid. He kept his team in it. And last night, the reason why the Ducks won that game is not by their scoring. It's by that their goaltender kept them in it, but he only faced 37 shots.
Yep.
But I believe the Ducks play better in front of Lucas Dostal than they do John Gibson at the moment, because John Gibson, I feel, ever since watching him in camp, he looks checked out. Is he competitive? Yes. However, I think it's time, and I'm sure it's already been discussed, we need to put him to a contending team. And I think the Edmonton Oilers or the Ottawa Senators are the best fit for him. Go ahead.
You talk up. No, it's perfect, because you talk about a point I was going to discuss on is that competitiveness inside of him. He's competitive. Anytime you go on the ice, you're going to be competitive, but it's having that competitive edge that takes you to the next level. I think he's lacking, and he knows this team's in rebuild. He knows it's going to be a progress, and I think he knows he's on the back end of his career, and he's saying, I'm going to do my work. I'll smile. I'll wave. I'll stop some shots. And it's kind of generically going through the motions a little bit. So give him an opportunity, send him to Edmonton, send him to Ottawa, send him to somewhere else, to a playoff contending team. Maybe he'll get that shot of adrenaline back in him and he'll be Gibson. And then a lot of fans are going to clamor, see, he could have done that here. It's like, no. We're not that said team. It's not going to work out in the same way that you think it's going to work out in. Looking at the numbers right now, we're both stat people. Dostal, 929 save percentage. Gibson, 907. Dostal has 99 shots against. To Gibson has only seen 86 shots. this year. So Gibson, for the first time in a while, is seeing less amount of shots coming at him, but what's going into the net is a little bit higher ratio than Dostal. So you can say that softness, those T pushes, the proper technique and things that he should be doing is not quite as sharp as maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe that last playoff run for the Ducks where he was still John Gibson. So I think we're really starting to see it now, and it's going to be very interesting when you look at the schedule moving forward the rest of this road trip. There is no back-to-backs on this road trip, and I'm pulling up the schedule right in front of me at the moment, looking at the days. You have
Thank God.
You got Boston tomorrow on Thursday, Philadelphia Saturday, Pittsburgh Monday, and then you have home against Arizona Wednesday. So no back-to-backs on the East Coast. You have at least a day off in between. So, I feel it's going to be a situation where we're probably going to see John Gibson in Boston. I would be shocked to see Dostal because, in my opinion, you ride the hot hand, and especially against Boston, who is going to come at you with shots that are a cup qualified team. Maybe you want to put him in a bigger matchup to see what he's got against those teams, because then you got Philly after that, who's, not going to be as strong as they once were, to each their own.
They're out to a hot start, but they haven't played anybody. That's the biggest difference.
That's where I think Greg Cronin is going to have that situation of who goes against the stronger, more resume team, and who's going to go with the good team, but more of a lesser resume. So my initial guess is, you might feel different. I have a feeling John Gibson to me is probably going to be a net tomorrow against Boston. What do you think?
I agree. I think it would be a huge shock, but it would also be a huge turning of the tide if he were like, I'm going with Lucas Dostal. You'll start against Philly, and then he'll start against Pittsburgh. Because every time he plays in Pittsburgh, he shits the bed. He's from there. It's just a fact. And it's not about the teams that are in front of him. And some people could argue and be like, oh, well, yeah, but the team wasn't very good. They got hardly any shots on net. But it's just, I'm so tired of that excuse. It's like, Gibson, you did your job and what you were supposed to do here. It's not your fault that promises were made and a certain individual named Bob Murray did not deliver on those promises. And now there's a new sheriff in town, Pat Verbeek, that's
who's
just
ready.
His
Dostal's guns in his holster. He's ready to go. He's ready to put him out there and take over this team. And when you look at the rest of the road trip, and it's a perfect segment to the final part of this podcast. And again, everybody joining us here for the Katella Chronicles podcast with our friend Zach Gray from Ducks Gameday Breakdown. We're sticking with this. As we talked about earlier on the show, and we'll remind you at the end, every week, primarily Wednesdays around 5:00, we're going to be jumping on here for a podcast. Hopefully, most of the time on Instagram, depending on the situation, but Instagram lives are what we're going for. You're going to get this content 24/7. So we're going to try to keep the episodes a little smaller so you guys don't lose interest, instead of the one episode a month that's like an hour and a half, almost like an in-flight movie at this point. We're going to keep them short, concise, and get you in it. Yeah. So perfect segment from the Gibson Dostal talk and talking about those games against these teams on the East Coast, like how Gibson has shit the bed against Pittsburgh before. Taking a look at the rest of this road trip. Boston's still undefeated. They beat the Ducks already this past weekend. Philadelphia 3-2-1 for 7 points. And Pittsburgh starting off a little slow, 2-4 with 4 points this year. How do you see the remainder of this road trip going? Because by the time we talk again next week, the Ducks will be returning home to take on the Coyotes. How do you think this road trip goes? And who is one player outside of the goaltenders in this situation do you think Ducks fans need to keep their eyes on for some big play?
Well, I predicted, I believe, when I did my October prediction video, which if you guys haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. It's on my reels. I predicted the Ducks to go 6-5 this month because of how tough the scheduling is. I could see them beating Philly. I could see them beating Boston just after how they played. Pittsburgh, it's always a tough building for the Ducks. I would love to see them win, but I could see them losing. So probably taking 2 out of the next 3. And a player to look out for, and I'll tell you, a guy who's just adapted to the NHL, and I know I'm probably going to sound like a, typical everyday fan, but is Michnikov, man. Like, just the way that he plays and his finesse and the way he finishes his checks and the way that he carries himself on and off the ice and how he carries the puck up the ice. And I think that's the thing that's so refreshing for Ducks fans is like, we have not had a guy who was NHL ready, I want to say, since Hampus Lindholm back in 2012-13. It's been some time.
A good decade.
Yeah. So to see a guy like Michnikov come in and do what he's doing, a guy like Leo Carlsson, McTavish last year, he got sent back to the OHL. They're following everything that they need to do. And I think that's the most exciting part to watch this team and just seeing them buy into what Greg Cronin is selling. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you want to go buy those tickets. You want to go watch this team. You want to watch this team every single night. My wife, who has been checked out of the Ducks since the 25th anniversary season, and she gets her news from me, she's watching every single game. Like, so what does that tell you? There's obviously a turn of the tide here. So love to hear your opinion, Dom.
For me, I think in 3 games, if the Ducks can somehow manage to get 4 points, and it could be 2 wins, 2 overtime losses, and a win, whatever the combination is, if the Ducks can find their way to get 4 points, that puts them at 8 total points. Right now, they're 2-4, so virtually exactly the same record as Pittsburgh through the first 6 games of the year. Boston's going to be a toughie. You just saw them, so we'll see which side of the pendulum that swings. Does it favor Boston after a win, or the Ducks going to be hungry for more? They play like they did those first 2 periods and really dynamic. I think there's a great opportunity to play upset spoiler. Philadelphia, I think the Ducks can get a win there. And Pittsburgh is just, as you said, it's a tough building. Sidney Crosby, the whole crew out there. There's something about Pittsburgh, at least in Pittsburgh, that the Ducks just fumble. So if somehow, some way they can manage 4 points in the next 3 games, that would be huge. I think that'd be a nice little bonus road trip. The Ducks got their first win on the road against Columbus, the first overtime or shootout win of the season as well. So let's keep the firsts for this year. So let's have a first successful road trip of the year. So I think that's where the Ducks can lie. For me, and this might just be stat packing type behavior, I've really, really loved from what I've seen from Vetrano to start the year. He's had that relationship with Greg Cronin back on the East Coast days. He's bought in, and we're going to talk about this a lot this year, about people buying in to what the Ducks are selling and what Greg Cronin's selling. Vetrano's selling or buying what Cronin's selling, and he's capitalizing on every single opportunity. He continues, gets the game-winning goal last night. He was set up in numerous situations with his line in that game against Columbus. I foresee him, again, it's an East Coast swinging road trip. He was so used to playing these teams so often when he was with the Rangers. It's like a mini homecoming for him. So I feel Vetrano's a guy to continue to look at offensively. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in the next 3 games, give him a goal and give him an assist. I think he's riding a little bit of a high right now. He's that primary scorer. I think his due time to get an assist is coming on up. So give me 1 more point, 1 more assist from him. And if the Ducks can squeeze 4 points out of the next 3 games, I think that's going to be really, really good moving forward in this. And I think you're in a great opportunity.
I think, especially since Greg Cronin has coached guys like Frankie Vetrano and Ryan Strome, you're seeing such a big turn. I mean, confidence-wise and development-wise, I mean, they understand what exactly he's selling.
Yep.
And to end this podcast, just to let everybody know, I got a hot take from one of my DMs. I'm not going to say who.
Ooh.
But one of them said to me that what Coach Cronin is doing is acting like a high school coach.
Oh, okay.
And I said, well, why? And he's like, well, benching guys who are grown-ass adults and guys who are been in the game for a while. And I'm like, but that doesn't mean that they have say in their playing time. He's the head coach at the end of the day. He's trying to have the players respect him, which is something that Ducks players have not done since 2018-19. They have not respected their coach. I would say even with the Randy Carlyle debacle before Bob Murray fired him.
And before Bob Murray took the bench.
Yeah.
Let's remember that.
I mean, it's giving full perspective, observing that instead of seeing the glass a quarter of the way full, see the glass half full, 3/4 full. It's just, we've come a long way to get here. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm always just excited for this season. Every single game day, I'm like, I don't know what it's going to bring, but let's just go for it. Do I think the Ducks played their worst game of the season last night? Absolutely. I do think that. I do think that they could have played better, but at the same time, it's a learning lesson for them. We're going to play a bigger, stronger team that's a cup contender this year. Let's go take it full force against them.
And this is an opportunity where hopefully the cup can runneth over, no pun intended, to the Stanley Cup. But when you turn on the TV, you listen on the Ducks stream, there's optimism on this team. And even though, as you mentioned, and I can agree with you in certain parts, that the game against Columbus was not the best game for the Ducks this year, probably one of the bottom games of the season. But in years past, when they played their worst hockey, they lost 6-1, 5-2, 7-0. Horrible. They ended up getting an overtime victory. So if you're starting to turn the tide in those situations and win games you shouldn't be winning because of your poor play, then you know something's working in this sense. And hopefully Boston, Philly, and Pittsburgh to round out this road trip before a nice big 2-week homestand is just the remedy for the Ducks. But in all encompassing everything we talked about today, from Leo Carlsson to the rest of this road trip, I'm Dominick Lorenz. That's Zach Gray of Ducks Game Day Breakdown. It's so great to make this finally official. We've been talking all week long in our individual chats about making this official. And if you, for some reason, if you're just tuning into the show now, which means you somehow skipped the first part, which don't do that. You want to listen from top to bottom at that point. Yeah. We're going to be doing this much more often because Katella Chronicles and Ducks Game Day Breakdown have officially partnered up to do podcasts and much, much more. So relatively so, every Wednesday around 5:00, we're going to jump on to, did I say on twice? That was interesting. I think
you said on twice. That's okay.
I think we're going to get on. We're going to get on top of this. Oh boy. It's one of those, come on, it's the middle of the week. It's hump day.
Dom, it's like when I did my breakdown this morning and I said more and more, hey, I'm right there with you, man.
Hey, you're foreshadowing the future. The fans want more and more and more of this.
And more.
And more. And just a little bit more after that. But we're going to be hopping on Instagram, relatively so, every Wednesday around 5:00 to talk Ducks for 30, 40 minutes to give you the best information, the biggest news possible, and our thoughts as well. And the Ducks so far are having a very nice start to the year. There's optimism around this franchise. And the Ducks looking for continue to have better days and more productive days as the progress continues with this organization. But for everything Katella Chronicles, you can check us out on social media at Katella_CHRON on X and Instagram. And then, of course, you can follow Ducks Game Day Breakdown. Where, Zach?
Instagram, please. And TikTok. And I post occasionally on YouTube, but mostly the main hub is Instagram.
Absolutely. So both of us will be on Instagram. Check out Zach's breakdowns. They are absolutely phenomenal when he puts them on. If you haven't, recheck them out. Even if you have watched them, watch them again because they're hilarious. And especially watch the Coyotes one from this past weekend. It was absolutely sublime. I watched it about 2 or 3 times just to absorb everything because I was feeling the same feels you were. So it was like therapy for me, which was great. So fans, thank you for tuning on in to this podcast episode. Check everything out. Follow both of us on Instagram. like, comment, and subscribe to this podcast here on our YouTube channel. We will see you next Wednesday on Instagram Live for our very next podcast episode. The Ducks will be returning home to Honda Center, so we'll be previewing the big homestand coming up. We'll be recapping the road trip as well, and much, much more. So until then, I'm Dominick Lorenz. That is Zach Gray. Again, the co-host that I normally have. David Goodkind couldn't be here today, but he extends his gratitude to all of you, and we look forward to having David back in our podcasting circle very, very soon. But until next time, Zach, cheers. Let's enjoy some Ducks hockey. And we're Katella Chronicles. We are the heartbeat of pro sports in Anaheim with our good friends, Ducks Game Day Breakdown. Cheers, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.